Good morning. Try that again with the sound. Hello. So Sheezy64 said, there's no stream. Has it been cancelled? And Stephen says, cancel culture's been cancelled. No, I just had some technical problems, so I took a minute to get stuff done. I fucking, whatever with sound. So hopefully it's all working and good. Okay. I'm tuning my ukulele. Yes. Okay. I know. No music. I'm barely used to talking on camera. Okay. Singing and playing on camera, that's probably a little while from now. But anyway, moving on. Sorry I'm late. So, okay, little bit of housekeeping. I'm now not doing daily shows. It's too much. I'm going to do Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I'm going to be more focused. Having that extra day gives me time to write notes and have a bit more structure and just be a bit more well-researched. I've noticed that I do tend to sort of stammer more and misspeak my words, and it comes down to a lack of preparation. I just don't have time until I can make this an actual thing where I'm making a living from it or justifying dropping my billable hours. I just have to do that. So I'd rather have fewer that are better quality and a little bit more time to write as well. It's a bit ambitious to do daily, but I did it. So it got me over my fear. So anyway, that was just some quick housekeeping. So if you're waiting for daily streams, I'm changing it. It's Monday, Wednesday, Friday morning. I'll try to do Fridays later in the day, but I've also noticed that I tend to not stream if I put it off till later. It's better if I just do it first thing in the morning, get it over with, because I don't know, it's just how I work, ADD. So the days get away from me. I have, lots to do. So anyway, housekeeping over. Okay. You may actually, if you're not Australian, you might not know this, but it's something that's a big deal here, which is that Macquarie Dictionary, which is it's pretty much accepted as the standard dictionary for Australian English. Every year they have a word of the year. Right. So one thing you need to know is that it's the Australian English Dictionary. They select a short list of words that they consider to be part of the zeitgeist or that have really summed up the year. And what they do is they then invite the public to vote on their favourite each year, but there is also a committee's choice word of the year. Okay. It's quite funny. And because, there's been some funny ones and I'll get to that. But this year's one is cancel culture. Okay, that thing that we've been told by the cancellers isn't real, for a start, and we've been told by the edgelords on 4chan that everything, including a dissenting opinion, is cancel culture, and we all know that the truth lies somewhere in the middle, and that's where I'm going to go with it, which is that fucking tribes, man. Can we just agree that cancel culture is a thing and that this has gotten a bit stupid? And I'm also going to explain some theory, okay? That's what I'm trying to do, is take an issue and then talk theory, and hopefully something fucking coherent comes out. I'll also use my Mr. Sparkle mug, my heat-sensitive Mr. Sparkle mug. So anyway, okay. All right. So this year in 2019, so every year Macquarie Dictionary come out with their word of the year. They put out their committee's choice in late November, like they've done this year, and then they have a short list that you put to a public vote. The short list is weird this year. It's fucking weird, but I'm not going to talk about that. That maybe might be something else, but I'll link to it. So in January, the public, this is why you shouldn't let the public fucking decide things, because you end up with Bodie McBoat faces and fucking all this sort of stuff. But anyway, the committee's choice is cancel culture. Okay, the word of the year, right? In 2017, the committee's choice was milkshake duck, which I actually didn't know was a thing until I read about cancel culture being word of the year, which is weird that I missed that one. I have never heard that term before, so I don't know, I must have been asleep or dead or something, I don't know. But so basically milkshake duck describes the phenomena that initially perceived as positive but later revealed to be flawed, right? And it's actually a very interesting trend when you look at the 2018, the word of the year was Me Too. Okay? And in 2019, it's cancel culture. We're noting a theme, right? It's interesting to see that through these sort of dictionaries and that this is bleeding into culture. This culture war is playing out in the dictionary in real time, right? Because in 2017, milkshake duck, which is basically something that you thought was cool, I'm not going to go into details. This is for every person, but it's the idea that you look at a milkshake duck and think it's cute or think it's something's cool, and then you find out that it's a terrible racist, or you find out that something's fucking ugly and it's disappointing, right? That's very much like old tweets when you think about it, right? Or Louis C.K., wonderful, great comedian, okay? Fucking one of the greatest comedians, arguably, of current time, right? And then you find out that there's a feeling there. Louis C.K. is a milkshake duck. Okay? Weird fucking word. I'm fixating too long on milkshake duck. It should probably be its own thing. But anyway, in 2018, the committee's choice for word of the year was Me Too, right? Which you might understand, which was that very much originated on Twitter, and it originated as part of a massive wave of people talking. It was basically a big fucking confessional on social media, right? That a number of men turned out to be milkshake ducks. Okay. In 2019, the word of the year is cancel culture. Whee! Hey? Look at that. Now, the reason I want to talk about that is because a lot of people are claiming that it doesn't exist, or that cancel culture is somehow something that is invented by the right. This is where tribalism comes in. It's like, fucking, you can sit in the middle and actually go, yeah, it's a thing, and yeah, Trump derangement syndrome is a thing. That Trump derangement syndrome is a thing, and not fucking be a Trump supporter because you've lost your fucking mind, okay? It's okay to, things can be true without you, like, don't be so dumb. Anyway, so this is the definition that Macquarie give, and I want to sort of dig a little bit deeper into this. Now, I'm trying to keep this under half an hour because I know nobody watches past that, and I'm trying to not waffle like I've been waffling. So, but the definition of cancel culture is that the attitudes within a community which call for or bring about the withdrawal of support from a public figure, such as cancellation of an acting role, a ban on playing an artist's music, removal from social media, etc., usually in response to an accusation of a socially unacceptable action or comment. Now, that's an interesting definition because that's where I think some of that misunderstanding is the fact that this is not that, right? Cancel culture is it's part of it. It's part of it, right? But what's actually happening is that's the stuff that you're seeing, okay? What you're not seeing is the people who aren't famous, who aren't celebrities, who don't have book deals and acting deals and are just everyday people, everyday journalists, right? And I'll get to that. Lawyers, accountants, people like me, agents, I own a digital agency and I'm, pretty well respected in my field, right? It's, that's just because you don't see it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And this is where cancel culture being defined that way, yes, it's true, and I can see why this debate is happening. And I'm just I'll flick through some of the conversations that have led up to this, because up until recently, there's been a lot of conversation about whether this is even real, right? So for those that aren't familiar, I've talked about cancel culture in previous, longer, crappier videos. I'm trying to get better. Bear with me. But in longer, crappier videos, and which is that it's not just about speaking truth to power. That seems to be the script that people are talking about. It's like using the term, like I've talked about before, it's like saying transphobia or racism or white supremacy or those kinds of words. They have changed meaning. They used to have a more narrow meaning, right? They used to have quite a specific meaning. Now, the problem is that the meaning has changed, evolved, morphed, right? And this is where you need to understand how power works and how politics works. And I'm going to talk a little bit about, don't freak out. I'm going to give you some theory, a little bit of stuff about the foundations of democracy, okay? And the tyranny of the majority and some of those things about liberty, okay? And that's why these things exist and why the process exists and the history, okay? And why this stuff is dangerous, okay? It may look like fun on the surface. It may look like, you know, justice, right? But it's mob justice. And this is what I want to sort of get to, okay? Eventually, that's me, okay? So this is the Macquarie definition, which I find interesting because it does conceal a lot of the concerns, especially around Twitter, and the censoring of voices that disagree, right? So this cancel culture actually does bleed into not just people who have done some socially unacceptable action or comment, right? It's socially unacceptable according to a specific group of people, which I've talked about, this cult that I think is rising in the left that we've got a blind spot for, that nobody's really paying attention to, the critical theory cult, right? I've said this before. I believe Judith Butler is the L. Ron Hubbard of woke, right? It's got all the earmarks. If you study cults, it's got all the earmarks of Scientology. And that's not me I'm not being glib, I'm not being insulting. It's not my style. I legitimately believe that a political cult has formed. Okay, so let's separate belief from behavior, like I've said before as well. So this behaves like a cult. It doesn't mean that I disagree with the beliefs, okay? And this is the one thing I'm trying to get through to people, is this idea that I can actually agree with some of the critical theory premises and some of that stuff and be on the left and still believe that there is a cult forming, okay? I truly believe this. Anyway, okay. All right. Politics is a religion too, by the way. It's a set of beliefs and it's an ideology. Okay, so they've concealed the meaning of cancel culture in terms of the implications of it. Now, it is the word, but it is a highly controversial word. Okay, now I'm just going to share this article. So committee's choice of the word, they've got a number of shortlists. I'm not going to go into the shortlist because I want this to just be focused and me, you know how I fucking run off in all directions and all that sort of stuff. So I'm not going to do that. But so this was about 2 weeks ago. Fuck, I don't know what day it is. Which is, cancel culture is not real, at least not in the way people think. Okay, now this is where we need to have this is where the disagreement lies. Okay, which is that people, so what you'll see happening, right? And because I follow everybody on different sides, and you know I have a very solid ground in theory. What I'll see is that someone will make a joke and then someone will get offended by the joke and then they will say, it's cancel culture. And then they'll say, oh, that's not real because you just don't like being told that your joke is racist, right? That's pretty much how this goes. It spirals into fucking oblivion. It's exhausting. And it's constant, right? And then they say, you fucking SJW, and they say, oh, you fucking Nazi. And then, like, everything fucking descends into chaos, right? That's generally how it all goes. And then in the middle, you've got people who go, you know what, like, okay. So anyway, where'd my brain go? It flew away. It flew away. Okay, so this cancel culture is not real, at least. So this is someone who's woke, right? And again, I want to explore the point, okay? And I will get to it, which is because there is actually a philosophical basis for this. And what's actually been very interesting about this whole phenomenon, it's a number of different things, is that people are using the same theoretical frameworks as a weapon because they don't understand the theoretical framework. So it's kind of like this weird, it's just, I don't like saying people are stupid, but it is a form of weaponized stupidity in the sense that people don't understand the real philosophical underpinnings to what they're talking about, right? And it's quite funny because it's like pulling out Orwell all the time. And like, I can guarantee most people haven't fucking read 1984. Right? But they're going, Nazis are, it's Orwellian, it's Orwellian, it's Orwellian, it's Orwellian. It's like, well, have you read what he said? Have you read it? Or are you just fucking going, but no, go to the source. Anyway, so it's basically just idiots arguing online, right? Let's just be clear. I still know this to be true, which is that the majority of people don't have a political science degree, don't study politics, don't understand like law and the legal structures that actually exist and the very strong foundational underpinnings of a lot of liberal democracy and how we got here, right? And why this is a threat. They just don't fucking get it. Okay, so if there's anything to take away from that, statistically, the person that you're arguing politics with doesn't understand what they're talking about. Okay, and I wouldn't even pretend to understand what I'm talking about, and I do understand what I'm talking about because there's just so much. I've talked about this before. So anyway, okay, so using the same idea against each other because they're in a tribe, they're not arguing ideas, they're arguing against a tribe, right? So again, I'm just going to summarize this. I will link to it as I always do. So this article in Time magazine says cancel culture is not real, at least not in the way people think. Okay, so the problem with, and I'm skipping bits because I don't want to be sitting here reading articles, right? But the problem with this perspective is cancel culture isn't real, at least not in the way people believe it is. Instead, it's turned into a catch-all for when people in power face consequences for their actions or receive any type of criticism, something that they're not used to. Now, that's true. It's also not true. Okay, so this is where tribalism comes into play here, right? It's true some of the time, but it's not true all of the time. And this is where the blind spot exists in the left. It's just such a fucking blind spot. And the left have this problem, and I've been involved in progressive politics for all of my life, right? Which is that they have a tendency to believe the best of people, the best of society, and see things in an idealistic way without realizing that they are engaging in behavior that is extremely oppressive, extremely judgmental, and extremely dismissive. At least one thing I've always joked about is that at least conservatives are honest and truthful about the reality of human nature, right? The left tend to deny, and this is where this whole fucking trans thing becomes an issue, because people just refuse to believe that a pedophile ring and powerful, and a bunch of fucking sick ass fetishist men could actually infiltrate an organization, when it's like the dissonance between Epstein and fucking Prince Andrew, and all of the fact that like women are subjected to harassment online, and all of these sort of signals, right? The dissonance is amazing. To think that never happens, that can't happen. It's like, well, no, we know this is true. Let's have a conversation, because we need to make sure that. Yeah, so anyway, that's actually Friday's thing, where I'm talking about one of the tactical documents around from a law firm about how to get things like self-ID and transing of children and those things passed and bypass the consultation process, right? It's actually written down, and it's quite worrying. But that's a separate thing. I just want to I'm saying I was talking about the blind spot that the left have, which is that they assume the best of people and the worst of people, right? The best of people generally and the worst of people they disagree with, and it's very interesting, right? That's the thing I find, and I'm just trying to get through, and this is why I feel my role is to try and talk to those people on the left who I know are smart, but there's a fucking I've trust me, it's always the people that you don't expect, right, who are pedophiles. I worked in child protection, trust me, right? Pedophiles are not, and predators are not a caricature of a man in a van, man. Like, it's just, it doesn't work that way. So please, please, please listen. Anyway, I'm not going on about that. I'm sorry. So anyway, but a big part of that is that the left have a blind spot, and they truly believe in this truth to power. We're speaking truth to power. Social media has given a voice to the voiceless, which is true. Again, it's true, for better or worse. But so in this article, for time, for those that are listening to the audio version, she basically says, I'm a black Muslim woman, and because of social media, marginalised people like myself can express ourselves in ways that was not possible before. True, okay? That means racist, sexist and bigoted behaviour or remarks don't fly like they used to. True, and that's good, okay? The problem is that what is defined as racist, bigoted, sexist behaviour, the bar has gone down here. And the targets are getting progressively lower profile. It's ordinary people, okay? And that is the problem with cancel culture, and that's where it gets dangerous, okay? So I'm going to go over. I've realised that I'm probably going to go over with this. So, yes, so we'll talk about that. So basically she said, this applies to not only wealthy people or industry leaders, but anyone whose privilege has historically shielded them from public scrutiny, right? And this thinking is that anybody, you got to understand within critical theory, I'm privileged, right? Despite being poor, disabled, autistic, all of these things, I'm white, therefore I can be a target, right? I am cis. So what they do is intersectionality has invented a whole new hierarchy of privilege that may or may not exist. It's actually more of a matrix. If you buy into the intersectionality stuff, and I'll talk about the intersectionality calculator, right? It's good for class analysis. It's not necessarily something that is a workable anything. It's just a framework for analysis and through the consultative process and just trying to remove blind spots, right? So the problem is that this has been weaponized into an ideology and turned into a cult, and this is where it's fucking dangerous. Because what they're doing is that they're concealing the truth, right? The belief is not the behaviour. The behaviour is awful. The behaviour is toxic, and cancel culture is real, and it has a chilling effect on everybody who fucking risks falling victim to it. Okay, so now, but yeah, so, we only hear about the rich and famous ones, right? We don't hear about the average person that gets fired or deplatformed, or, people like me who struggle to start, who have a lot of respect but start speaking out, but then get called a TERF, and then suddenly everyone fucking just scrambles and goes quiet, and you don't get booked, and all of that sort of stuff, right? You don't hear about your average person who says something on Twitter and some fucking extremist calls up their work and says that person is a Nazi, right, or a white supremacist, which is extremely loaded and extremely dangerous, when all they've said is something that is innocuous, like, I don't think that that's actually racist, to something that wasn't actually racist to someone who thinks that it was racist, right? That's how low the bar is to be called a white supremacist. But they can still, cancel culture is someone calling up and saying they're a homophobe, they're a Nazi. These are serious allegations, and this is something that this is the danger part that I'm talking about, right? Parts of cancel culture are great. I've been a digital evangelist since the 90s, right? My entire career happened by accident because this wonderful fucking thing called the internet, right? I'm going to defend it to my dying breath, the right for people to self-express and produce content that makes them happy, right? But this is terrifying, okay? The fact that you can actually call somebody and harass them, okay? So anyway, anyway, I touched my hair sorry, Randy put a comment, right? Fix my hair later, just keep on talking about the women. Okay. I'm not fixing my hair. It's just in my line of sight, and I'm also nervous on camera, and I have sort of little stimming things, and that's one of them. I'm autistic. I rock back and forth and I touch my hair. That's just something that You know, I can't help. So if it annoys you, then you're welcome to listen to the podcast version. Okay. But yeah, so cancel culture so this is really the perfect word for 2019. Like, a lot of people are going, well, what the fuck? Why is cancel culture the thing, right? You've got Obama talking about it. You've got Ricky Gervais. All the great comedians are taking it on, right? Because there is a high court judge, sorry, not high court judge, a judge in the UK saying that there is a chilling effect around certain issues, because if you get branded with transphobe or you get branded with this, it is a brush. And it is up there with witch trials. And that's where I'm going to get into some theory. Okay, now I know that this has been long, but part of the structure of this is that I do a bit of a rant and then I try to get you to learn about a word, and then you might even just go and have a look and learn a little bit more and learn to understand, right? So, so cancel culture is perfect because underneath, right, because underneath it, even just the definition itself, right? If you go back, I'll go back, is that it's concealed meaning, which means that you've got useful idiots on the left turning around and saying, well, that's just, you know, to speaking truth to power, and it's not cancel culture, it's consequences, right? It's self-defense, right? And this has a very dark philosophical history to it, okay? And that's what I want to talk about. But then on the right, you've got people who, well, not on the right, but just fucking, let's just say, I don't like left and right anyway. Can we just say dickheads ruin it for everybody? My previous video was like how toxic conversations become, so that even your average person fucking polarizes because they come under attack. That's cancel culture, right? But other idiots, like, they just claim something's cancel culture when really it's not, which it is. It's just somebody taking objection and replying. So right of reply is as much a part of democracy as, you know, it's not the belief, it's the behavior, and it's the chill, and it's the way that it's the controlling, and it is the destroying of people's lives, and the Orwellian, let's have a drink, this idea of you know, being unpersoned, right? And in Scientology, it's called fair game, right? Which is basically, we don't believe in X, Y, Z. We don't believe in violence. We believe in this. We don't do this. All of this code of conduct, right? Unless you're a suppressive person, then you are fair game. We can destroy you. We can sue you. We can harass you. All of that, right? We will talk to everyone you're associated with. We will destroy your life. Cancel culture is fair game, okay? Look up fair game in Scientology if you're interested in it. But that's the mindset, right? And that's the scary part, okay? Which is this idea that anybody who is deemed a suppressive person, and I'm a suppressive person because apparently I'm a TERF, which I'm not. I fucking spent the last 3 days being besties with a bunch of transsexual women. How can I be a fucking TERF? Anyway, whatever. But yeah, the behavior, somehow there's this mindset that the behavior is justified by the belief, right? And that was my blind spot before I sort of got called a TERF and went, what's a TERF? Perhaps what's this? What's this? What's happening around this word? Holy shit, what's happening with the law? Oh my God, like this whole thing, right? It was a 3-year process where I was just, you know, reflexively just not thinking, and I'm pretty smart. I hate to like stupid people don't think. I was a thinking dumbass, right? And so I thought that I bought into this whole fucking the rise of the far right and Trump's a fucking this and all that. And it's like, well, I never really thought that was, I thought that fucking the sky wasn't falling in. It wasn't ideal. I'll be honest, it's certainly not ideal. It's certainly entertaining and it's not very nice and it's not cool, but like it's not the same. It is not the same. Okay. So anyway, but you just need to understand history and philosophy to understand that Trump, if anything, is more libertarian than he is fascist, right? He's not a dictator. Okay. He's actually just someone who he's probably more anarchist than anything else. Every man for himself, fucking whatever, right? And he sees this stuff. He's broken some things where they needed to be broken. Okay. Whether you agree with it or not, he has opened our eyes to the role that the media plays in this political cycle. He has opened our eyes to how, like, even just the Guardian have lost they're off their tree. But anyway, again, I keep digressing. But but just this whole stuff, like, again, read Orwell. But and I hate, because it's become a cliche. It's one of those things where people just use Orwellian, and they have never fucking read Orwell, right? Animal Farm's my favorite book, and 1984 is just it's pretty stellar. But George Orwell's essays are actually worth reading as well. If you're a fan of Orwell, don't just go with that. But anyway, he was a journalist. Okay, so. Oh, thanks, Randy. Well, that costs money. So if you want me to talk dirty, you can give me money. Go to my Patreon account, and that costs a lot more than I think you can afford. If you want to do that, I will. Yeah, that's fine. Right? Optional. But that costs more than you can afford, I reckon. Okay? So, hang on. All right. Anyway, sorry, I was thinking I'll just let it go. Anyway, yeah, so Stephen LeBlanc raised a really good point, which is about the term privilege. Now, it's really important that these words have shifted in definition, okay, and they conceal a deeper meaning, okay? So privilege, again, in sociology, used to have quite a narrow meaning, which was when you are analysing and undergoing analysis, those things, those things... Oh, fucking hell, that just distracted my brain. Give me a sec. That's the nature of live streams, is that, like, I get distracted. Anyway, what was I saying? Oh, yeah, the words change meaning, right? So one of the really, and this is where it gets quite scary with a lot of this movement and with the entryism that I've referred to before, is that it's quite a deliberate concealment of words, right? And I've said this before, that I believe that social justice, the woke cult is to social justice like Scientology is to personal improvement, right? So if you talk to a Scientologist about Scientology, they'll say, what's wrong with trying to be a better person? What's wrong with community? What's wrong with that? And it's like, well, that's not the point. It's not the belief. It's the behavior. And this is why I think there's a lot of confusion, because there is a cult and they are sort of acting in a way that the cults behave, okay? But it's not necessarily about social justice. It's about power, and it is about it behaves like a destructive cult. And that doesn't negate the fact that social justice is necessary, and that there's that some of the theory behind a lot of this stuff, because they're actually undoing and redefining a lot of the theory that I know to be correct and true and valid in a particular context. Like if you're making policy, I know I've gone off, but it's worth saying. In policy, things have a specific meaning, okay? Like in the policy process, you consult and you go through a consultative process and you go through all of these things. That's a very clearly defined process. It's a very and Marxist analysis, feminist. I've talked about this before, but feminist analysis, critical theory. Let's just say critical theory came out of literature, by the way, not politics. Political scientists, the fact that this has taken over politics is bonkers, because it's come out of cultural studies and communications. It's not actually political theory, it's philosophy that's come out of literature. Like if you need anything to know that it's unworkable, it's basically fucking power. It's basically fan fiction. But as a political scientist, I'm going to say it's unworkable. Privilege is good. It's good to sit down during the analysis phase, during the stakeholders and in the consultative phase with law and policy. Again, actually, that's a good way for me to get back on fucking track, right? Which is that exists in the system. If you're following the process correctly, that exists within the system, right? And I'm going to talk about John Stuart Mill because he's probably the easiest, and this is very superficial, okay? But in On Liberty, he talked about the tyranny of the majority. Now, in government, tyranny is the idea that there is rule by one man, okay? So you've got a tyrant, okay? Now, tyranny of the majority means that once you get to a point where the majority is in power, right, that the majority pursues its own interests at the expense of the minority. And so what that does is it results in the oppression of minority groups, comparable to a tyrant. So it's basically no different. So again, it's that whole idea of mob rule, collective thing. Like blue checks, I would argue, on balance, act like a tyrant, because they're a collective that have a shared interest, shared values, shared framework, all of those people, they act as one. Okay, so that's what you need to understand, is that tyranny of the, but in John, that's obviously not John Stuart Mill's theory. I'm just applying it in a way that you might think. But in a democracy, right, left unchecked, right, the majority does pursue its own interests at the expense of others, and it's very, and we're seeing this now, right, and that's where it's become. So anyway, part of that, and again, this is your everyday person's definition. Okay, this is not meant to be fucking. Hang on, let me change to the cameraman. This is not meant to be a fucking TED talk or a lecture. I'm saying this is this concept. Go read it. Here's a very, very basic version for anyone who doesn't know anything about politics. But basically, part of tyranny of the majority, okay, is that there is a distortion of democracy, right? I talked about stealth authoritarianism recently as well. It's very similar to, it's called a democracy, but it doesn't behave like a democracy. It's not the belief, it's the behavior, right? Same thing. But basically, the elements of this, I guess, tyranny of the majority is that it's a distortion of democracy, but there needs to be an abandonment of reality that occurs as part of that sort of mob rule. Now, so it's an abandonment of rationality, right, at the expense of numbers. That might be, so if something's popular or something is sort of, and it doesn't have to be popular, it could actually just be snuck in without consultation. It could be something that is done under stealth authoritarianism, right? Passing laws quietly. I talked about passing policy and not law, because policy doesn't need to go through legislation and judicial review, right? Those sorts of, there's lots of strategies that you can sort of not... it's at the expense of reason, right? So at some point when the mob is in charge, again, this is a live stream and my fucking brain doesn't like, you can read it. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But basically, there's the foundations of I guess, liberal democracy as designed by, because J.S. Mill had a big influence on American politics. A lot of the foundation of that is that in order to prevent that tyranny of the majority, right, and that's populism. So what we're dealing with right now is this populist thing, right? Okay, where people lose their fucking minds, don't know how things work, but they vote according to feelings, right? It's kind of that like that, right? But rationality, there's no real rationality. People lose their minds in a group, right? There's lots of different theories around this. So I hope this comes out making sense. Anyway, but there's a whole bunch of checks and balances in place that make sure that this, that to protect this inevitability, right? Which is the thing that, like, when you're making policy, you consult. So you consult before the law is passed to make sure that it's that everyone's included. You have debates, parliamentary debates. You have representative democracy of people who theoretically understand how the process works and are better equipped to make theoretically better equipped to make decisions for the populace in their best interests, right? But they do represent the majority in theory. And also, after the law is passed, judicial review and law and the courts and the justice system work to correct and hold that to account again. So any citizen can sue the government and go, okay, this is bad law and this is why, and the justice system. So that is actually designed by design to prevent mob rule. Now, what we don't have is that online. And what this is a form of stealth authoritarianism, which is where, under the guise of free, people are just fucking using these stupid words. Sorry. Yeah. Well, Stephen, you can say, I can defend who I want, mate. So anyway, I'm not defending. I am a political scientist, and I can defend, and I can also denounce, and I do defend and denounce Trump frequently. So if you think that defending Donald Trump means that you're going to not pay attention to what I've got to say anymore, then that's something that you need to reflect on, because that's exactly the kind of behaviour that leads us here. So anyway, okay, so and I also want to I want to introduce you to the concept of this. Where is it? Fucking spastic. Okay, all right, screen share. So it's ochlocracy. All right, there's words. It's almost like there's words for these things, and this is why I find it funny with the dictionary adding in new words. It's like there's already a fucking word. If anyone could understand that digital is now real life and real life is now digital, it's not the internet it used to be. They're the same thing. We have an ochlocracy. Okay, not only is it a fun word to say, but it's it applies. And also, so basically, ochlocracy is the idea of mob rule, okay? So it's considered the pathological version of democracy, okay? So in ancient Greece, it was considered one of the three bad forms of government. So good and bad in this sense, right, refers to whether the government acts in the interests of the whole community or the interests of a few at the expense of the rights of others, okay? There's massive fucking history here. Okay, it's almost like this exists before your fucking tweet. Okay, it's almost like if you read some stuff, you might get some understanding. Oh, I wonder why, what's going on? Because this is how humans behave, and this is especially how humans behave online, because humans behave like humans. Okay, which is that we have to constantly fight against fucking the tyranny of the majority, and constantly fucking argue against mob rule, and constantly try to keep this shit at bay so that people don't fucking get massacred. Okay, it's almost like you can learn from history. And I'm not saying, and it's got nothing to do with Trump and Hitler, because if you know your history, you know it's not like that. The real threat right now is the woke cult, because no one's paying attention to it. And, you know, it's interesting. Anyway, Epstein didn't kill himself, pedophile ring, but fuck, there's no way in hell they could infiltrate my fucking local fucking drum circle, because way too fucking smart and well-resourced and clever to prevent that. No, they're entering every fucking organisation. Okay, anyway. Okay, so good and bad in this sense. Okay, it's not a moral judgment. It's just, you know, good in this sense means whether they act in the interests of the majority or the whole community. And in this, again, for the feminists out there, let's just add a caveat there. At the time, that meant men, that meant citizens, that meant men and whites and, you know, people like that. So that was the definition of the community and the citizen, and that's where we need to sort of adjust some of our thinking around that to incorporate more of those experiences, right? That's the role of critical theory. It's the only role for critical theory, okay? Tearing it all down is not how you fucking do things. Okay, anyway, so it's almost like we know stuff. Okay, so anyway, but, you know, the Salem, this is basically vigilantism. The Salem witch trials are a really good example, most famous mob rule, where the emotions and the lack of rationality and the collective conscience of the people took power and overruled those of the majority. Okay, sorry, those in government and those in power. So no matter what laws they passed, same thing with like lynchings and those sorts of things, right? I'm glad I don't monetize, because there's no way in hell I'd be able to say these things with this. So, but basically, like, there's three good forms of government. Good being it serves everybody as best it can. Three bad ones, okay? The three good forms are monarchy, aristocracy, and democracy. So what that does is yes, there's problems, but there's problems in every system, but those are the three good forms, right? Relatively, okay. I'd think about it more in terms of stability, probably, just to be simple. Now, and the three bad forms, and this is from ancient Greece times, right? Which is tyranny, oligarchy, and ochlocracy, okay? So tyranny, we talked about, right? Which is ruled by one person at the expense of everybody else. Oligarchy is ruled by a few, and simply, let's just move on from that. And ochlocracy, which is mob rule, okay? Now, I've talked about elitism populism and pluralism before. That's another lens in which to look at that, and we can talk about that in another video. So there's lots of different fucking ways to, like I've said this, there's hundreds of terms to look at things and different perspectives and ways to look at it. But I just thought this was a good word. It's a cool word. If they're going to put cancel culture in the dictionary, I'm going to remind them that this fucking exists. I'm going to bring back old good words that actually have like some research behind them. Okay, so anyway, that's ochlocracy, right? Now, again, my point, right, which was, this one was written by Barrett Wilson, and he wrote an article for Colette, and this really does sum up the experience for a lot of people. I've been through it. I've seen a lot of other people go through this, right? And it's like, I was the mob until the mob came for me. And that was me, right? I pretty feminist, right? If anything, I've said this before, I've had to reflect on how I treated men before, once I realised that I was behaving in the same way. Again, it's not the belief, it's the behaviour, and I behaved poorly. I still behave poorly. I've learnt some lessons this weekend from an amazing discussion with some transsexual women, and really, really recalibrated my own behaviour when I was thinking in absolutes, and black and white thinking, and then they educated me in a way that has really enriched my knowledge and my empathy and my love. And hello, ladies, you know who you are if you're watching. But so again, I won't read this whole thing out, but it's worth saying that I say this as someone with experience who's been on the left for 20 years, working in policy, working in election campaigns, okay? Understanding this theory very, very well, and I still fell into this sort of cult thinking for a bit. Not for long, because there's a point where the definition started to like smell a little. Yeah, I didn't sort of go full on. Sorry, I just saw Stephen's comment, and I think we should focus more on what we agree on. He said, "For the record, I'm anti-massacre." It's like, well, at least we can. I think we can agree on those things, and that's where it's a good starting point. Anti-Nazi, anti-massacre. Oh, Jesus Christ. Anyway, laughter is power. Jokes are power. Jokes bond you, okay? Unfortunately, Stephen's actually someone who sort of lunged himself into the middle of a bit of trans banter between myself and some transsexual women, and they were making fun of some stuff, and I think he unwittingly jumped into the middle of a conversation when we were just laughing and bonding over humour. And that's another big part of what I hate about this cancel culture, is that there is no humour in it. There is no irony. It's just digging through old tweets, finding fucking offending out of context stuff and getting you cancelled, right? And just not understanding how comedy works. I've talked about this before, so I won't go. But anyway, but this, right, this mirrors my experience. I haven't written about it because I did spend a lot of time sick, and I haven't really gotten my writing brain back yet because of all the fucking drugs I'm on. This is why this is now my writing, because I can't, but anyway. But I was the mob until the mob came for me, right? I drive food delivery for an online app to make rent and support myself and my young family. This is my new life. I once had a well-paid job in what might be described as the social justice industry. Then I upset the wrong person, and within a short window of time, I was considered too toxic for my employer's taste. I was publicly shamed, mobbed, and reduced to a symbol of male privilege. Right? This is what I was talking about before about white supremacy, that serious accusations that just aren't true, right? Writing anything under my own byline now would invite a renewal of this mobbing, which is why, with my editor's permission, I'm writing this under a pseudonym. He knows who I am. In my previous life, I was a self-righteous social justice crusader. I would use my mid-sized Twitter and Facebook platforms to signal my wokeness on topics such as LGBT rights, rape culture, and racial injustice. Many of the opinions I held then are still opinions that I hold today, but I now realise that my social media hyperactivity was, in reality, doing more harm than good. Okay? When my call-outs were met with approval and admiration, I was lavished with praise. Thank you so much for speaking out. You're so brave. We need more men like you, right? Then one day, suddenly, I was accused of some of the very transgressions I'd called out in others. I was guilty, of course. There's no such thing as due process in this world. And I talked about that as well, which is that due process exists as a correction for this mob rule, right? The law, process, conversation, all of these things, they exist in theory and structurally within our democracies. And I say democracies because I'm in Australia, but anybody in a Western democracy, this is the foundation, okay? Because mob rule is a threat that actually undermines government. It's terrible. It's a terrible thing, and that's why the law exists. That's why process exists. That's why the rule of law exists, okay? Once judgment, Once judgment has been rendered against you, the mob starts combing through your past, looking for similar transgressions that might have been missed at the time. I was now told that I'd been creating a toxic environment for years at my workplace, that I'd been making the space around me unsafe through microaggressions and macroaggressions alike, right? And that's amazing, so, and yeah, okay. I got called a racist the other day, some time ago. I've talked about this before because I defended the fact that stock photography models are mostly white, right, in marketing. And I said, well, it's actually very hard to find the appropriate images and blah, 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 and that makes me a white supremacist. So that's how low this bar is, right? And this is what I'm talking about. When I talk about cancel culture, I'm not talking about Me Too. I'm talking about transgressions, okay? So social justice is a surveillance culture, and this is the fucking... We'll do the cult stuff too around thought reform, because confession and surveillance is one of those big parts of it. It's a snitch culture. The constant vigilance on the part of my colleagues and friends did me in. That's why I'm delivering sushi and pizza. Not that I'm complaining. It's honest work, and it's led me to rediscover how to interact with people in the real world. I'm a kinder and more respectful person now that I'm not regularly on social media attacking people for not being kind and respectful. Okay? Now, again, I'm not going into the whole the issue, right? But the rules have changed. The rules did change. If there's one thing that you need to understand, it's that there is a shift, and there's a lot of people who don't know that the rules have changed. It is part of getting old. I'm 40. I'm at that point where suddenly it feels like the world has just fucking gone upside down. And a part of that is people have lost their minds because they're so busy and fucking distracted with Trump, they're not seeing what else is going on. But also the fact that they're taking critical theory as gospel, which comes out of literature. It doesn't come out of law or fucking even jurisprudence or history or politics or fucking anything credible. It is literary and cultural theory. Okay, and yes, culture is downwind from politics, but this is a big problem. Okay, there are political theories around this stuff, and that the thing that we need to understand is that by design these structures exist for a reason. Yes, they're imperfect. Talked about this before. Invisible Women's a great book. There's great books around. I try not to touch the race thing because it's just not. I don't know. I'm trying. But we've got to admit that the default man, the default white man, the default lost man, right? Yes, there are areas where things have been designed around that, and heteronormativity. Again, all pretty valid feedback for somebody who understands how this stuff works. For someone who doesn't understand how this stuff works, that's where religions form, and that's where this becomes dangerous, and this is where it becomes toxic. Okay, so... anyway, if I've got one thing to just say about this, is that cancel culture is real. It does exist, right? There are pillars for democracy for a reason, like due process, freedom of expression, all of those things, right? There are deliberate tactics for those that, who are trying to undermine democracy and undermine rights and take over and oppress others. But most of the people that allow this stuff to happen are useful idiots. Okay, who are sitting around with a blue check on Twitter, pretending that it's not real, pretending that they're speaking truth to power, pretending that they're, what's wrong with social justice? Is like, no, you got to understand this is how it gets you, okay? This is the trick, Okay, this is how we get gaslit. Cancel culture isn't real. It is real. Okay, it's in the dictionary. It's officially in the dictionary now. So it's real. Okay. As was the definition of woman, but let's just fucking leave that there. And but it does, it conceals the meaning, and we just need to think about the behaviour. As I've said before, right, it's not the belief, it's the behaviour. I tend to agree with a lot more of this stuff. I'm not someone who's on the right sitting there laughing at triggered SJWs. I believe there is a legitimate threat. I am not somebody who sits there screaming that the sky is falling. But I do feel like people are asleep on this, and I do feel like because people don't actually understand why these things exist, why these processes exist, why these structures exist. Yes, they're not perfect, but the alternatives aren't good, okay? The alternatives are not good. So thank you for watching my live stream. I haven't really looked at the questions because there are quite a few today, right? Okay. Stephen, you can. Stephen said, "Wait, what cult?" I have talked. I'm still talking about this stuff. I'm doing more research. I want to make sure I'm clear. Again, I've said that cults aren't about what they believe. Cults are about behaviour, and that and again, I'm not saying the entire left or activists. I'm saying that a bunch of activists have unwittingly found themselves shilling for a cult by mistake. Okay, and that there is a cult-like thing that's come out of Tumblr, you know, in recent years, and it's starting to behave that way, and it is infiltrating the left. Like my history in politics, they've always been there. They've always, if you're in political parties, you know, the crazies have always been there, right? But we underestimated their capacity to get power, and I think that there's the useful idiots, people are just going along with it. It's very sophisticated and very clever. I can talk about that more, but this stream's gone way too long. Is there anything else? It's good that, you know, I think we learned something today, that it's good to be anti-massacre. At least we can agree on that. But just understand, like, there's foundations. None of this is a mystery to anybody who takes the time to learn it, and that's why I want to go sort of Digipolitik and just focus on this, because none of this to anybody. I think that's where I'm unique, because I do have this grounding and expertise in politics, but I've also been 20 years in digital and I've been studying tribes and internet and marketing and all this stuff and internet culture for fucking 2 decades as well. And as a designer, I understand design. I understand all of these sort of, it's a perfect storm of many factors. And so I think I'm uniquely positioned to talk about this. I'm just going to I'm just trying to get the message right and try to be a bit more focused. Hopefully this was better. Thank you for saying I'm funny, Randy. I try to be funny because, you know, this stuff can get really dry. But hopefully you've learned something. If you want to support me, I do have Patreon, Subscribestar, fucking all that stuff. You know, this actually literally costs me money to do. I don't get paid anything to do it, but I'm trying to make it a thing. So if you know anybody, you know, I'm trying to do this. I'm fucking trying to be a YouTuber at 40. My kids think I'm a tragic. I mean, my odds aren't great, but, you know, whatever. Going from sort of super shy, fucking autistic, like ADD introvert person to this in 6 months has been quite incredible. So thank you for watching. Every second of your precious life that you give me, I'm very grateful for. So thank you for your precious life seconds. I love you, love each other, listen to each other, and I will see you on Friday.